Let's learn Tanya, dear friends. First of all, good evening. I don't even have anything. I don't have my coffee tonight, so we don't have what to say l'chaim on. Okay, but good evening. And it's been a little while. We haven't learned Tanya for quite a few weeks now, right? Which isn't good, but at least we had a good excuse. we had the holidays. So first of all, I want to wish you all, which is what we Jews wish each other, a good year. Now that the holiday season is over, we officially begin the year. Till now was, I guess, orientation, right? Till now was getting us fired up, giving us all the fuel, the inspiration, and all the goods that we need for the coming year. And now the year begins. And I want to wish us all that it should be a good year for every single one of us. Who knows what the tremendous blessings, God willing, Hashem has in store for all of us. And it should be a good year for each and every single one of us, for the Jewish people. So, and a good year of studying Tanya as well. We should all have Hashem's success, that our Tanya class should be strong and successful, and that the words of Tanya should touch our hearts and touch our souls. So, amen, amen, God willing. All right, dear friends, chapter 34. And we are continuing straight off from chapter 33. Now, it's been a few weeks since we learned chapter 33. So I want to remind you at least briefly what we spoke about in chapter 33. And then we'll learn chapter 34. Chapter 34 is a relatively short, and it's a simple, sweet chapter. This is not the whole chapter. This is part one of the chapter. We'll have more soon. But it's, I was thinking about possibly trying to push the whole chapter into one class. I felt it would be a little bit too much for one class, so maybe two shorter classes. Let's see, today's maybe going to be a drop of a shorter class. Chapter 33, the author ever taught us like this, on one foot, and let's keep it brief. I'll try. Chapter 33, the author says, I want to introduce to you the greatest form of joy for a Jew. The greatest form of joy for a Jew is when a Jew gets to live life with a deep sense of awareness, of consciousness, of God's true oneness. Which means the default way that human beings look at reality is that if there's a God, it's somewhere out there. In my life, practically, there's no God. In my bank account, there's no God. In my traffic jam, there's no God. Meaning, there's an inherent detachment from the perspective of our perception. The way this world, and we are members of this world, the way this world perceives God is that God is something but, something other than this world. And the reason why God did this, the reason why we experience it this way is because God did this. God created what we call an absolute sense of obstruction, that this world totally obstructs the presence of God. And because of that, God is simply not part of the fabric of our reality from the perspective of our reality. Right? And the best example of this is that you can't bring God to a lab. You could bring anything in this world to a lab, right? If it's part of this world, you could bring it to a lab. If you can't bring it to a lab, then it's not real. So, what is God? God made it that from the world's perspective, God is simply not here. God is MIA. He's maybe elsewhere. He's maybe a truth, but not a truth of our world. Okay. The author says, what a Jew should do, and what a Jew needs to do, is to take the faith and the belief that we all have in God, and to develop that, to understand it, to personally connect with it till it becomes a part of our consciousness. When we do, says the author Rebbe, there's a whole new quality of life. Right? Like the saying goes, perception changes reality. The way you perceive, that becomes your reality. So the way you perceive God, the world vis-a-vis God, that changes your reality. And the Alter says there's an unbelievable joy that flows of a life when you are tuned into the fact that God is real and that God is the truth of this universe, and that there's no separation, there's no detachment, there's no dissonance between our reality and God. Even more than that, and this is one of the critical key ideas that the Alter introduces to in last chapter, is that when we do this, when we bring God into our mind and into our heart and into our soul, to the point that we are consciously living with this awareness and this consciousness and the experience of God in our life, when we do that, that is called bringing God into this world, or giving God a home in this world. God wants a home in this lowly, totally ungodly world. How do we make a home for God? Says the Alter Rebbe, well, you're the candidate. You're the one. You're the one. You're the only. God wants to be a home in you. You have to invite God in. Which means when we bring the belief of God, the faith of God, the reality of God into our lives, into our thought process, into the way we perceive and feel about reality, now God is living on planet Earth. God is living inside of you. And the Alter says, I've got news for you. That is actually the reason why God made you. God made you so like that you could be his home. And now you have to do it. But that's your mission. That's your purpose. That's the purpose. Big word, big word. This is your purpose. Not only is it your purpose, it's the purpose why God made everything. The whole existence came into being so like that there could be a Jew who lives on planet Earth, who lives in this spiritual desert, and brings God into this world. How do you do it? The Alter told us the supreme way how to do it. The way to do it is simply put in the mental effort to bring God into your life, into your mind, into your heart. And now God is living here on earth. And the Alter says when you do that, there's unbelievable joy. You have a different quality of life. That was chapter 33 in a nutshell. Sounds familiar? Sounds familiar. Okay. Chapter 34. The Alter Rebbe now speaks, before we're speaking about the concept of bringing God into your life and experiencing that. Now, in chapter 34, the Alter is going to speak about the practical phenomenon of that happening, which they call phenomenology. Ever heard of that word before? Phenomenology? Phenomenology is the study of what something looks like in real life. What is the phenomenon of this thing? So, for example, you could study about Judaism as a concept. That is conceptual study. Then you could study Judaism as the phenomenon. How do you study Judaism as the phenomenon? For example, I don't know. Go to a Jewish community. See the phenomenon of Jewish life. Meaning see it happening. And sometimes the concept and the phenomenon are sometimes it's different. You know, what the way it plays out practically is different than what you would think it would look like conceptually. So the Alter gave us a concept in chapter 33. The concept is study about God, you will feel it, you will develop it, and now God is living within you. Now let's speak practically. Let's speak about that phenomenon. And we need to be a little bit honest. Here it's going to get real. Is this something that we could really accomplish? What we just studied in chapter 33, to bring God into our consciousness. Could we do this? Is this practical for regular people like me and you? What do you say? Meaning, conceptually it sounds beautiful. Conceptually it sounds wonderful. But in the world of phenomenon, in the world of it really happening in our lives, is this something which we could really accomplish? Gil, you say yes. So explain yourself. So why yes? You're not wrong, by the way, Gail. I want to hear what your thoughts are. You got to unmute, Gail.
Well,
There you go.
you can do it by putting an effort in to study the Chumash, to pray from the Siddur, to do Tehillim, to just bring God into your life on a daily basis in your thought pattern, in your actions.
You're saying it works. You're saying put in the effort, study Torah, study Chassidus. Make it happen, right? Daven, crack open that siddur, that Tehillim, and bring God into your life. And you're saying it will work.
It takes effort. You have to have a plan, and you have to do it.
You have to work hard. You have to work hard. Like there's a Hasidic saying that we've done enough. We've done enough to pull the horse to the water. But to force its neck to go down and drink, that it already has to do by itself. Right? At some point, okay, come on. You're going to drink, you got to do it. Anyway, that's a side point. You just remind me of that, right? You got to put in the effort. Put in the effort, and maybe you'll bring God into your life. Okay. Do we agree with Gail or not? Not we as in we, but are there any other thoughts? What do you say? Is this practical? In phenomenology, in the phenomenon of our lives, today, tomorrow, the next day. What do you say? You gotta hear some thoughts. Anybody have a dissenting view from Gail? Even just for argument's sake? Devil's advocate?
I think it's a very hard thing to do because all your life you've been brought up. I mean, if it depends how you were brought up. Obviously, if they come from a family like yours and it's given to them all the time, the children grow up with that feeling. But if you're not, then it's a very difficult concept. But it is true, the more that you do, the little things that you do to add on to it helps you to believe more and communicate with God more. Each little thing that you do is helpful, but it's not easy. It's very hard.
It's not easy. So you're saying if you're brought up that way, it's easy or easier. Yeah, I think even it's. By the way, that's a false argument. The religious people, it's easy for them to relate to God. I don't think so. It's maybe even harder. It's maybe even harder because you're so used to everything. Nothing inspires you anymore. Right?
One more thing I'm going to say.
But that's already another point. Yes, Gail.
It's a commitment. It's a commitment that you make with yourself and with God, and you do it if you really want to do it, and if it adds to your life as you're doing it, I think you do more and more. Yeah. I mean, at least that's what it was like for me.
So I like what you're saying. You're saying we could do it, and if the Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya that we should be doing it, we could probably assume that we could do it. Okay. But all that said, let's discuss the phenomenology of Jews, the Jewish people, really living with this faith and what it looks like in the phenomenology. And then let's ask that question again. All right? So, chapter 34. Here we go. Chapter 34 is titled, You Can Make a Home for God. Part 1, is it practical? Is it practical to host God in your life? Okay, here we go. It says the Alter Rebbe, now, it's common knowledge that our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, wore the supernal chariot described by the prophets, but as human beings on earth. Okay, so without going into the whole depth of it, the prophets, Ezekiel, and also another prophet that comes up, I believe, twice in the Torah, in the Tanakh, speaks about the divine chariot. You ever heard about it? The divine chariot. Okay. This idea, there's a divine chariot for God. And our sages tell us, by the way, our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, when they were living and breathing here on earth, human beings, they were the chariot. Okay. Now, chariot, of course, doesn't mean the physical thing. Pieces of wood nailed together, right? it's a concept. What does it mean that three human beings are a chariot? So what's a chariot? Let's think for a second. A chariot, number one, is a tool that you use to get somewhere. You go into a chariot, you go into a car, right? A vehicle. A chariot's a vehicle. You go in and it takes you from here to there. What does it mean that our forefathers were the chariot of God? What it means is that they, our forefathers, carried with them God into this world. They were literally taking God and being a vehicle for God in this world. A vehicle of expression, a vehicle of presence. And let's also think about it this way. Chariots are fully plugged in. They are harnessed to the horse and to the wagon driver. They have no will of their own. They just simply follow the energy, the movement that is given to them. They follow the tug of the wagon driver. So that's our forefathers. They pulled it out? All right. Yeah, okay. Tonight, while we are here, this is actually the reason why I am doing the meeting here from home. While we are having the Tanya class over here, right now there's a city commission meeting in the city of Birmingham, and they are right now, right, we do this every single year, and they're right now, it's on the vote for the committee to have the public menorah lighting and the 12-foot menorah in Shane Park. So Mushki is joining that meeting by Zoom, and that's why I'm here. So that if I need to, which I may need to. So the way it works is, just to share with you, the way it works is by these committee meetings is that they have a whole agenda. They have 15, 20 items they want to talk about that they need to vote upon. And at the beginning of the meeting, they say, okay, we're just going to do a quick vote on all the issues that nobody has any issue with, right? But if any of the committee members, or if anybody in the crowd, anybody could say, I want to pull item G off of the agenda. It's like that we could have a separate segment of the meeting to discuss it. So our good fortune is that the menorah lighting was just picked off to be dealt with separately, which is going to make the whole meeting, I was saying, yeah, it could have been a done deal by now, but now it's going to be a longer process. We have to see when in the meeting we're going to get to it. Mushki. Yeah. How many other items do they pull off?
A bunch.
A lot?
But it's not about that. We're one of the first. They're going over the items at the end. They're general consent at the beginning, and now they have like a bunch of new business and old business, and then only then do they go out to the pulled out things. So a good half hour probably. Okay,
it's gonna be a little while. All right. But if I need to, sometimes I have questions. I'll need a. Okay. So, good stuff. Okay. So our forefathers were a chariot. They're bringing God with them. Their very presence brings God into the world. And they are so plugged into God. Now, what does that mean practically, says the Alter Rebbe? What that means is that throughout their entire lives, they never ceased, even for a moment, to bond their minds and souls to the master of all worlds. Practically what it means that they were the chariot, it means that they were plugged in. They were constantly, mentally, and soulfully bonded with God. They were continuously in the state of bittul to God's oneness that we just discussed.
Maybe I'm wrong. It's now.
Right now?
Yeah.
Do I need to answer any questions? You want to put on speaker?
It's not letting
Here, I can't hear you.
It's not. I know, but it's not. It's very nice.
2024.
Yes.
Yeah.
There are latkes and music. It's lovely.
It's fun.
Okay.
Anyway, with that, motion to approve is written.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're good.
Yeah, what do you say?
Oh, he just.
We could, but we can't.
Anyway, I leave, right?
We have a person.
Yeah, 1 second.
Thank you, Brooks. Thanks.
There's also paper copies in the back corner.
Oh, 1 second. What is this?
We're on item I now.
Oh.
Consent.
Of the consent.
Oh, so it's voted. We're done.
Yeah. I thought they do it at the end.
Yeah.
What did he say?
He just wanted to share that he came last year and he's not Jewish, but it was really fun and he wanted to encourage everyone to go.
Oh, that's
So,
wonderful.
That's all.
All right, that was shorter than we thought. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Mushki. Now we're good. Now we're good in the clear. There was 1 year they made problems. Somebody tried making problems for me. But thank God.
I wish you would have seen who that was.
I know who it was. He's a brand new guy. He was here last year. I have a picture of
We
him.
should message him.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Back on with the show. Our forefathers were in a state of bittul. What does bittul mean? Bittul is a phenomenon when you are in a state of bittul, it means that you are aware that you are within God. And when you're living in that space, you think differently about life. Your daily agenda are not only about you, your wants, your desires, your own little petty things, but you see life from a whole different perspective. When you live life and God's in your life, that's called a state of bittul, where you move away your ego and God is a presence within your life. Maybe God is the presence within your life. That's bittul. So when we say our forefathers were the chariot, they were bonded with God a whole day, it means that they simply lived with God in their life 24/7. Not only that they obeyed God, but they were plugged into God to the point that they felt that, they lived with that, and every single thought, speech, action, every single thing that came out of their brain and their heart was godly. They were simply tuned into that. That's how deep their connection was. Unbelievable. 24/7. Not that they were once in the morning, once in the evening, every now and then they were tuned into God. They literally, in their sleep, they were tuned into God. That's quite a phenomenon, right? Talking about phenomenology. That's next level stuff. Okay. Following them, let's continue the story. Following them, this was the state of consciousness of all the prophets. That's what it means to be a prophet. A prophet is not just somebody who gets divine messages. A prophet is a saint, a holy person who is plugged into God and living from he's living in a different wavelength than every other human being. He's really in tune with God in a very real way. This was the state of consciousness of all the prophets. Each one reaching whatever level possible according to his particular soul level and mental capacity. Every single prophet, depending on his depth, their soul level, their mental capacity, each one had their own different experience. Some were more profound, some were deeper, some were richer. But the point was, this one, it means all the prophets, they had this sense, this state of bittul. They really, truly lived with a visceral sense of the presence of God within their world. The level of Moses, our teacher, was beyond all of them, all the prophets. Moses attained such bittul that they said the Shekhinah speaks through the throat of Moses. Moses was so plugged into God that Moses' throat was a tool that God used. God spoke through Moses' throat. It's not that Moses was a faithful repeater of what God had to say. It was literally, if Moses is speaking, God is speaking through his throat. Okay, this is what it means to have people who lived and walked on this planet, and they were plugged into the state of consciousness. And it wasn't just a belief that they had, I believe in this, I believe in that. It was an experience which totally took over their lives. Let's ask the question again. What we just described to bring God into your life in chapter 33, in practicality, is this something we could accomplish? When you study the experience, the phenomena of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, the prophets, God, they were so plugged into God and they so let go of their own ego to the point that God is literally able to speak through their throat. Never for a moment in life are they not connected with the truth of God. And because of that, there's a purity, there's a holiness emerging from them. This is a whole new level. When you read this, all of a sudden you realize, 1 second. I guess I could bring God into my life, but I don't know if I'd call that anything compared to what these guys were doing, right? What is that? What that maybe makes us feel that maybe this whole thing is out of reach. It's maybe out of our league. To live with faith, to bring God into my life, what I'm doing, I don't know. Could I even accomplish anything similar, even a drop of what the forefathers, of what Moses was able to accomplish? Can I really accomplish any real state of bittul? Can I really enter a state of consciousness where I'm really connected to God and God's a real presence in my life? I don't know. Let's continue. The story continues. And we actually have historical precedents. Could we as Jews experience what Moses experienced? Can we as Jews experience what our forefathers experienced? To really see and perceive and just be plugged into the truth of God. Says the Alter Rebbe, let's see. When the Jewish people stood at Mount Sinai, they got somewhat of a taste of this state of consciousness. God granted the Jewish people a moment of revelation. Let me share with you the truth of God. What happened then? Didn't work out too well. What happened? Only that they were not able to withstand it. As our sages say, at every utterance, their souls took flight. Every single time God spoke, which in other words, every single time God showed the Jewish people, allowed them to see the truth of God, you know what happened? Their souls took flight, which is a very beautiful way to say that they passed out. Very eloquent way of saying that they all died. The Jews couldn't handle it. Now the story is that God revived the Jews, and then God tried it again, and they again passed all out. Their souls. The point was, this was such an overwhelming consciousness that the human body, the human mind, and the human heart couldn't begin to wrap its head around this, and it just overwhelmed them to the point that they passed out from that. In other words, the Alter Rebbe continues, they underwent this bittul that overwhelmed their very sense of being, as discussed above. They had the bittul that all of a sudden their entire ego, their entire sense of being, their entire version of reality was just destroyed by this new perception that they just got. They couldn't handle that. They passed out. So could regular Jews handle the state of consciousness of Moses and our forefathers? The historical attempt didn't work out well. But God wants us to be able to have it. So what did God do? Continues the Alter Rebbe, that's why God immediately, right after the giving of the Torah, God immediately told them to make a sanctuary for him. Make me a sanctuary. The Mishkan, the holy temple. Make me a temple. What's the point? Why did God want a temple? Because the focus of the sanctuary was the inner chamber, the Holy of Holies, where his Shekhinah, where his presence, that's what Shekhinah means. Shekhinah means God's presence. So the Holy of Holies, where his Shekhinah would reside, meaning a place where his oneness would be manifest. And this will be explained later. Which means the Alter Rebbe, the Alter is explaining like this. First God gives a Torah, and then God says, make me a tabernacle. What's the storyline? What's the juxtaposition? What's driving the story is God wants to live in a very real way within the Jewish people. God tries granting the Jewish people that state of consciousness, and what happens? The Jews can't handle it. So God says, but I still want to live amongst you. I still want to have a place amongst the Jewish people where my truth lives amongst the Jewish people. How can we do that? So what God said is, if I can't get into your minds and hearts, because it's going to literally explode your minds and hearts, let's make a building. And in the building is going to be the key room, the Holy of Holies. And in that space of the Holy of Holies is the only place on earth where the deception, the obstruction of godlessness is gone. the truth of God is revealed in that world, in that room. That room is a sacred space that's at the very center of the Jewish people. And in that space, there's a truth of God. And the Jewish people can always get access to that room. Not directly, but it's there with amongst the Jewish people. It's an access point. So here we have the storyline. To really experience God in your life is big, big, big stuff. Could we do it? The answer is maybe a little bit, but you want to get right. You want to do the real serious stuff. If you want to experience it the way our forefathers experienced it, the way Moses experienced it, that's not happening. That's out of your league. But God wanted to give the Jewish people an access point which is not going to overwhelm them. That's what the Holy Temple was all about. Okay. We have this whole historical context here because of, let me shut off my ringer, because the Alter Rebbe wants to answer a question. The Alter Rebbe is speaking to the Jew who learned chapter 33 and reads it, and he's so excited about the prospect. I could bring God into my life. I could experience bittul. I could experience a sense of godliness in my life, in my world, in my day-to-day life. And I could experience the joy of feeling God in my life. And then the Jew realizes, but you know what the problem is? This is beyond me. I can't afford this. I don't know how to do this. I can't do it. Not for me. And he feels like he has to give up. And that's a real bummer because the Alter Rebbe told us this is your purpose. You have to make a home for God. But how do you make a home for God? The Alter Rebbe told us, bring God's consciousness into you. But I can't do it. So I guess I'm not able to fulfill my purpose. That's no good. The Alter Rebbe says, no. Let me show you that you could do it. And the Alter Rebbe says, let's even look historically. God wants you to do this. God's going to give you an access point how to do it. That's why God gave the Jewish people the Holy of Holies. Okay, let's continue. Today we don't have a Holy of Holies. So where is our access point to bring God into our lives? For us to make a home for God. How could we do that? Says the Alter Rebbe. Let's continue. And ever since the Holy Temple in Jerusalem was destroyed, God doesn't have a home and sanctuary in this world for his oneness, other than the 4 cubits of halacha. The Torah, and specifically halacha, the part of Torah that teaches us how to live our life. That is something in this world which captures God. The Torah has God within it. Halacha is God's will and wisdom, manifest in the guidance that is codified for practical application to human life. Halacha captures God. All of Torah captures God. This unique thing about the Torah. Torah is not just God's instructions. Torah literally gives us a piece of God. God put himself into Torah. Now, this is a very wild concept. If I write a book and you read my book, you don't have me. You don't have me. You have what I wrote. You have ideas that I thought of. But you don't have me. But with the Torah, God didn't just write the Torah. God put himself into the Torah. So God used to be found in a specific place. You go to Jerusalem, go to the Temple Mount. In the Holy of Holies, there's God. Literally, that's a place within this world that God is fully manifest. But where's God today? Where in our world do we have a practical access point for God? Says the Alter Rebbe, it's Torah. Torah study. When a Jew studies Torah, they're directly coming into contact with God. And when you study Torah, you are bringing God into you. Because when you study, you bring that information into you. And if Torah has God in it, then when you take Torah into you, you're bringing God into you. So Alter is going to tell us there's a very practical way for any Jew to bring God into their life. It's Torah study. So let's bring it home. Let's continue reading. And here the author tells us practically where he's going with all this. Practically speaking, how all this applies to you. This is what you have to do. Once you have thought as deeply as you can on this concept of bittul that we learned of just now earlier in chapter 33. Now you need to have a few words with your heart as follows. Gotta tell this to yourself. Which means, first author is saying, go do as much as possible of chapter 33. A Jew has to try, even though you're not going to reach the levels of Moses and the forefathers, but that doesn't matter. Every single Jew has to try to study and learn specifically the parts of Torah about God, and to bring that faith and understanding and awareness and consciousness of God into you. As much as possible to tap into that and to live with that. But then says the Alter Rebbe, then you got to tell yourself the following. Look, right here we got the quotation marks. Here's the script. This is what you got to tell yourself. Look, considering the limitations of my mind and the root of my soul, I really don't think I can handle being a truly genuine vehicle and sanctuary for God's oneness. I don't think I'm going to be that. I'm really going to be a vehicle the way Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob carried God into this world, and they were so deeply plugged into God. I'm going to be a sanctuary for God's oneness the way Moses was plugged into God. I'm not going to have that. I mean, none of my thoughts can really grasp him in any way at all. No comprehension whatsoever. Not even a smidgen of the grasp that our forefathers and the prophets experienced. I'm going to experience God? Who am I fooling? This is not even a tiny bit of what the forefathers accomplished and what their level of consciousness was. So says the Alter Rebbe, here's my plan. This is what I'm going to do. I will create my own sanctuary and personal institute for God to feel at home. How am I going to do that? Page 255, through studying Torah with whatever time I have. There you do it. Step number one is you got to do the heavy lifting as much as possible to bring God into your mind and into your heart. You got to do that as much as possible. But then you have to also acknowledge that no matter how much you've brought God into your life that way, it's very limited. But that's step one. You got to do that. Then says the Alter Rebbe, then you got to study Torah. Whatever time you have, you got to study Torah. Why? Because that's how to bring God into your life. And that's why you are alive. The reason why God made you is like that you could bring God into your life, so that you could give a home for God. It's like that you could host God in your life. So how do I do my purpose? Step number two, after the trying to develop the bittul and the awareness and the consciousness of chapter 33, step number two is study Torah. Torah is the way you bring God into your life. Let's continue inside. I will fix a time for study at day and at night, just as it is prescribed for every person in the laws of Torah study. Like the sages taught, even if all you can manage is one chapter in the morning and another chapter at night. Okay. There's a mitzvah in the Torah to study Torah every single day. Now, like every single mitzvah, you got to know what's the requirement, how much, how little. So it all depends on your life circumstances. What are your life circumstances? Some people, God bless them, with comfort, with affluence, and whatever it is. Or they don't need to work, or they aren't working. Whatever the case is, they have more time. If you have more time, you got to study more. Every Jew has to study in the morning and the evening. That's a requirement. Every morning, every evening. If you have more time, you have to study 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the evening. But if you gotta work, you gotta work. You know, right? The Torah wants you to work. So then it says, okay, 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening. You can't afford that. Then only 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening. And if you really have to work so hard that you don't even have an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening, then at least one chapter in the morning, one chapter in the evening. And you could open up a code of Jewish law, laws of Torah study, and it tells you what tax bracket you fit into. No, I don't mean that, right? But what bracket you fit into, how much time you need to study, if it's 2 hours, 3 hours, 1 hour, one chapter, morning and evening, and you do that. And the Alter says, you have to tell yourself, that's my plan. I could practically make a home for God, just like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob brought God into their life, and just like Moses brought God into their life. I could do that too. How am I going to do that? I'm going to study Torah. That's something that I could do. Every Jew has access to Torah. Study Torah, figure out how much time Jewish law tells you need to study Torah every single day. Study that, and you're bringing God into your life. Now God has a home in this world. Before a Jew studies Torah, God is homeless. God exists in ideas, but no one's taking in the ideas. But when the Jew opens up his mind, opens up the book, and studies Torah, studies Tanya, what are you doing? You're inviting God in. Now Torah lives in a Jew's mind and heart and soul. Continues the Alter Rebbe. When you do this, you will find inner happiness. You will celebrate and feel thankful for your lot in life. You will be filled with joy and with optimism. All because you are privileged to host the Almighty twice a day. Every day. According to the circumstances and the amount of time that God has granted you. Which means you are not chopped liver. The forefathers hosted God. You could host God too. Don't give up. Don't feel that this big important mission of bringing God into this world is beyond you because you can't experience tremendous, amazing, divine consciousnesses. Study Torah, you're bringing God into you. This is the mission statement of this chapter. Torah study is so important for this one reason, because God wants a home in this world, and the way we could do it is by studying Torah. By studying Torah, God is there in the Torah. And we bring that Torah inside of us, and now God lives inside of us. That is why when a Jew studies Torah, not only are they becoming a smarter Jew, we don't care about becoming smarter. When a Jew studies Torah, now they're becoming a more godly Jew. It's an amazing thing. A Jew becomes more deeply connected with God by studying Torah. How does that happen? I studied information. Why should I feel more connected to God? That's what happens, because God is there in the Torah. That's how it works. Okay. We have one more paragraph that we're going to be learning today. The Alter Rebbe now is going to add another level. Not only could you also host God, but if you think about it, the Alter Rebbe's alternative plan, or step B of the plan, that we should study Torah, is not good enough. What's the Alter Rebbe trying to say? You could fully give God a home just like our forefathers did, just like Moses did. Why? Okay, they developed tremendous deep states of consciousness. You could study Torah. You know what the problem is? Yeah, but I'm only studying Torah an hour a day. Moses was plugged in with God and giving God a home 24 hours a day. My study of Torah is only for 1 hour. It's still not good enough. The Alter Rebbe says, no. I'm going to show you how the entire day you could be hosting God even when you're not studying Torah. And we're going to learn more about this next week, but at least now we'll have the first idea. The Alter Rebbe says, you're studying Torah. For how much time you're studying Torah? You're going to go and determine how long you need to study Torah every single day. And you're going to study it with a commitment. But the rest of the day, you're not studying Torah. 22 hours a day, 23 hours a day, you're not studying Torah. So the Alter Rebbe says, okay, listen, do like this. Have a sincere intention that even though right now you don't have the opportunity, you don't have the privileges, you don't have the freedoms to be able to study Torah more than an hour a day, but have the intention that were God to give you greater luxury, greater affluence, greater freedoms, and you would have more freed up time, that you would study them. You would study more. Have that in mind. And there's a principle in the Torah that when a Jew sincerely has an intention to do a good deed, even if he doesn't actually get to do it, but God counts it as if he did it. See, even though you're only studying 1 hour a day, but have that good intention that you would be studying a lot more. And it has to be pure. It has to be a sincere intention. But if it's a sincere intention, says the Alter Rebbe, it's as if you're studying Torah a whole day. Which means from practically speaking, you are hosting God a whole day. Because God considers as if you're studying Torah a whole day. Let's read that inside. Middle of page 255, it's part 2, hosting God 24/7. It says the Alter Rebbe, beyond the limited time you study Torah daily, you should make a firm and sincere commitment that if God will grant you greater time and capability, then you will add more power to your learning. And since those are your sincere intentions, God will consider it as though you actually are learning the whole day. And this way says the Alter Rebbe, a Jew should never think. There's no Jew who is not destined to make a home for God. Maybe we can experience levels of bittul, of this consciousness that Moses and our forefathers and the prophets were able to reach. But we need to do whatever we can. That's step number 1. Try, study, and really try using our own efforts to bring God into our consciousness. But then study Torah. Practically speaking, that is something which is 100% accessible to every single Jew. And when you do that, you bring God into your life. And dear friends, with that, we conclude for tonight. The way the Alter Rebbe wants to bring this very practical, and this is the phenomenon, the phenomenology, right, of how a Jew could practically be a home for God. And dear friends, with that we conclude. It's wonderful being back with Tanya. Next week we'll conclude chapter 34, and then we're on to one of the most amazing chunks of Tanya. Chapter 35, chapter 36, and chapter 37, which is going to take us quite a few weeks to learn. Those are the heavy-hitting chapters.
Well, I really enjoyed this one more than any of the others so far, actually.
Wow. Okay, there you go. Wonderful.
Yeah, I did too. It makes our religion more intimate with you, and it gives you a little bit more understanding. Rabbi, what's the difference between a prophet and a sage?
A prophet is somebody who is getting direct communications from God. A sage is a Torah scholar. A Torah scholar is not getting communications from God. Prophecy is very unique. They would literally have moments where God would give them a message, and then they would have the mitzvah of sharing that message with the Jewish people.
Should I call you from the car, or we'll just stop when I get there?
Yeah, but different, very, very different. Zagazont, have a good night.
Do you have
Excellent.
time for?
We'll see y'all soon.